What is up, guys? This particular step I refer to as verification. It's just making sure everything looks correct with the Death Star install, and also it's a window into beginning troubleshooting any problems with installation. First step, we're going to make sure the stats are in the correct location. Let's go to Stats Editor in the config options. We should be able to see the Death Star folders down here on the left hand side, or whichever version of the HUD we have. If we have the Star Destroyer, we should see the Star Destroyer folder, etc. If we don't see the Death Star specific folders on the left hand side here, it means the stats aren't in the right location. And if the stats aren't in the right location, the HUD's not going to work, plain and simple. Another thing to check is whether the pop-ups and the HUD itself have been placed in the right location. The pop-ups and the HUD, they have their own unique files, which also have to be placed in the right location, similar to the filters themselves. If we go into HUD Editor, we should be able to see all of the available HUDs that we've purchased and installed in this drop-down box here. If we don't see these HUDs, it means that the HUD file itself has not been placed in the right location in the directory. It's pretty much the same for Pop-up Editor as well. If we head to Pop-up Editor, we should be able to see all of the available pop-ups in the drop-down box. If the pop-ups don't appear in this list, once again it means the files responsible for loading the pop-ups are not in the right location. The reason why we're looking at these separately from the filters is that I've seen issues in the past where somehow the filters have ended up in the correct location, but the pop-up and HUD files have not ended up in the right location. So the Death Star user has all of the stats, but they don't have the pop-up profiles and the HUD profiles. You can see in this case an example of a working install where all of the pop-ups are available. Also, notice the colors on the HUD panel. This is how the HUD panel should look. If you find that a number of the stats are all one color, it means the fonts have not imported correctly. The most likely cause of this is that we did not delete the templates folder in the hand-to-note config directory before running the installer. This was covered in the installation tutorial, so if you're not sure what we're talking about, it's recommended to take a step back and go and watch the regular installation tutorial, and that will show you how to delete the templates folder in order to get the fonts working correctly. Even at this stage, it might be the case that this particular HUD is not going to work, and that's because we can't access the stats themselves. In this instance, we're deliberately running an install that's not going to work. How do I know whether hand-to-note's going to be able to use these stats? Well, if I hover over any stat, and it could be a stat in the pop-up editor, it could also be a stat over on the left-hand side. Now, if you have a look at one of the filters that ships with hand-to-note, we can see a definition there. We can see all of the actions that generate that particular filter. Now, if I hover over a Death Star stat, we can see the name of the stat, and we can see the package that that stat belongs to, the Death Star X package. But we don't see any definition. Why not? Because for some reason we don't have the permissions to use this particular stat. Now, it could be a couple of reasons for this. One might simply be the case that you've downloaded and installed the wrong version of the HUD. For example, we request activation for the NL200 Death Star HUD, but then we download and install the Unlimited Death Star HUD. We're going to get a dialog similar to the following, because although we've installed the files for the Unlimited Death Star, we only have the permissions up to Death Star NL200. Now, while that's a possibility, most of you guys are going to grab the correct installer and have requested activation for the correct HUD. And yet, you're still going to see that we don't have the permissions for some reason. Now, a couple of other causes for this. Number one, you haven't received your activation email from hand-to-note. So here we can see a quick example email from hand-to-note informing us that a particular HUD package has been bound to our account. Now, once we submit an activation request at pokerdeathstar.xyz, we may need to wait for a period of time before we receive this email from hand-to-note. So if you've activated and downloaded the files immediately, they may not work immediately because you need the HUD to be activated first. You should receive this email within 24 hours from requesting activation of the HUD. If it's been over 24 hours, feel free to ship a support request to support@pokerdeathstar.xyz, and we'll look into why your HUD is not activated as it should be. A third option, and this is potentially even the most likely issue, is that we've installed H2N from fresh and we haven't actually input our serial key. If we go to configuration, other options, this is where we'd normally check to see which HUD packages are bound to our account. As we can see here, there are no HUD packages bound to our account because we're not logged in to any specific account. What we have to do in this instance is we need to go to our H2N account, we need to grab our serial key, then enter it into this box here. Now, one thing to keep in mind, just very briefly, is you should never share your serial key with anyone. Very often we get support requests from players where they have their serial ID, they even include it as part of the email, and it's not a big problem in our case because we have no interest in stealing your serial key, but just make sure you're careful about who you give that to, and that's why in this video we're going to blur out the serial key information. Now, once you've input your serial key, it will prompt you to restart H2N, so you should agree to that, restart the software. Now, when we head back to the licensing section of H2N, you can see all of these tags which indicate the HUD packages which are bound to our account. We were looking for the Death Star X tab, which wasn't there originally. So perhaps we contacted support, or perhaps we realized we didn't submit a request for activation on the pokerdeathstar.xyz site. Either way, we've requested that now. We've received an email. We can see the Death Star X tag is there. So let's return now to our pop-up editor and see if we can see the definitions on those stats. This time, when we hover over a stat in the pop-up editor, we can see the full definition of the stat. That means we have permissions to use that stat, and it's now going to work when we clear and rebuild stats in the database. That brings us to our final pointers here. Firstly, nothing is going to work or build unless we first clear stats and then build stats again. It doesn't matter if we have the hands already imported, we cannot skip this step. Once everything is configured, we then need to clear stats and build stats. If you previously built stats but you didn't have the permissions for those stats, you will still need to clear and build stats again. It's very important that we don't skip this step. Quite a number of support requests are solved by simply telling the user to go and clear and rebuild stats. Everything then magically works afterwards. Final thing is to head into config game types and make sure the appropriate pop-up and HUD is selected. If you're using the Death Star, we want the Death Star pop-up and we want the Death Star full panel. Same advice, but for whichever other profile you want to use. So for example, if we want the Star Destroyer, we're going to choose the Star Destroyer pop-up, and we're going to use the Star Destroyer. You can either choose the regular HUD panel, or I recommend using the multi-panel for increased flexibility in terms of table layouts. We have Star Destroyer, then Star Destroyer multi-panel. Once that's done, make sure you click Save, and then, you guessed it, go and clear and rebuild stats again. And if those HUDs are not selected in game types, then the stats will not be built for those specific HUD profiles. It's very important that we select them first in game types. Again, a lot of problems are solved by simply asking the user to first select the correct HUD and pop-ups in game types, then clear and rebuild again, and things generally start working after that. The vast majority of problems that players face will be addressed in this particular video that you just watched. If you have some kind of problem outside of this, feel free to consult the troubleshooting section of the manual. Or if you've exhausted all other options, feel free to ship a message to support@pokerdeathstar.xyz. Alright, thanks very much for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed the Death Star HUD.